Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Welcome to the Yahoo Sports NFL Podcast. I am Yahoo senior NFL writer Terez Paylor. Here, my main man and fellow senior NFL writer Charles Robinson. And Charles, if Antonio Brown does in fact get traded to the Raiders, what is the over/under on the amount of Brown meltdowns we'll deal with in 2019?
I think year one's the honeymoon. I think this is the upside of you. And you and I even talked about this before, that we both think. I brought up before when I had a chance to talk to one of my Cowboys guys a while back just about AB and how do you feel about this? And he said to me, we've already had TO. So if I think that sparked the conversation between you and I where we both agreed, like, year one is going to be fine. Like, that's the prove it to my ex-girlfriend year, that I'm great. So what do you do when you get out of a relationship? You hit the gym, you get yourself in shape.
You drop 20.
You drop 20, you get the haircut looking nice, you buy some new clothes, you stalk her for a little bit so you can accidentally run into her.
and you make sure you accidentally run into her with the new one.
With the
replacement,
yeah,
right.
Exactly, with the replacement. Like, I'm fine, how you doing? No, I'm good.
And you try to make sure that replacement has some trait that the girlfriend's going to be very annoyed about.
Yeah.
What's interesting about this, though, Charles, I don't hate Antonio Brown to the Raiders, but the Raiders have to do this the right way. The reason I'm talking about this team specifically is that various reports today have the Cardinals, Broncos, and Jets all out on Antonio. Those are just reports. That's what they're saying, Charles. And one team that's consistently been mentioned for AB is the Raiders.
Right.
And it makes sense because John Gruden does not care about potential chemistry stuff. He does not have a problem with big personalities.
Right.
And if you want to tout it as with some positives, which I'm willing to do, listen, John Gruden receivers, historically, they almost always catch 1,000 yards. They almost always get 1,000 yards receiving.
They get fed.
Yeah, they get fed. In his 11 years as a head coach of the Raiders and Bucks, he had an 11,000-yard guy each season. So, his guys get the ball. And also with Oakland, that's actually the Raiders are a pretty good franchise for AB. But for you, Charles, stuff is leaking about the Steelers wanting a first-round pick for Brown. How does that sound to you? Does that sound appealing?
I think that's too expensive for a couple of different reasons. Number one, age. We're talking about a guy who's 31 years old. Okay, right?
Yeah,
and
he's turning 31 in July.
He's turning 31. He starts next season at 31. We're talking about a guy who is going to want, and people need to pay attention to this, he may not want the contract immediately, but I guarantee you as soon as the 2019 season ends or halfway through, Drew Rosenhaus is going to be knocking on the door saying, hey, it's time to either rework it, extend it, get my guy some new money. It's going to be all about getting AB new money in 2020. But I do agree with you in terms of the dynamic. So after I covered the Lions, I went and worked for the Orlando Sentinel for a couple of years. And one of the teams that I dealt with occasionally was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when Gruden was coaching them. And they had a lot of, whether it was Warren Sapp, obviously Keyshawn went through there. There were a number of big personalities, guys who were very far out there in terms of opinions, in terms of their mentality, socially, all these different things. And Gruden never had a problem with any of those guys. So to me, AB fits. And I think given his proclivity toward post-career, we're seeing it now, he is definitely planning for big things post-career. I don't think being in Vegas will be bad for him in 2020, to be honest with you.
You know what? I would agree with that. And I will say this, though. If the Raiders can get Antonio Brown for a second-round pick, I'm all for it. Okay. Let's go. Let's have fun. Let's go. But I'm going to have a really big problem if they trade a first-round pick for him, okay? Brett, better bleep that. And I did it on purpose because check this out. I did a little research here, right? If the Raiders were to trade the 24th pick in the draft, which is one of their first-round picks for Antonio Brown, that basically means they traded Khalil Mack for Antonio, right? And a first-round pick and a third, right? Those two things are not equal, even with the first-round pick. So you don't trade the stud edge rusher you can't replace, first of all. Second of all, even if they trade the 27th pick, which is their last first-round pick, that means they traded Amari Cooper for Brown, which is even worse because Amari Cooper's 25. and Antonio Brown's 31. Now, Brown's the better player, but Cooper's a lot younger. In that case, what are you doing it for? Look, in the short term, it'd be an upgrade, sure. But you also have to deal with what you talked about, Charles, which is as soon as he feels like it's time to get paid, you can start seeing some of this Steelers behavior kind of leak back to the surface. And I think we've seen that's not a great thing.
Well, and here's a little nugget for you, too, that I think is interesting. And it's germane to the Antonio Brown conversation.
Yes.
If you're going to get Antonio Brown, I highly doubt, I question their stance on Derek Carr. And let me put it to you this way.
I heard some stuff too. Yeah.
So when the combine took place and Mike Mayock, the general manager, gets up there and he sings all the praises of Derek Carr. And, I'm hearing from guys like, hey, they're going to be committed to him at least for a year while they figure out, maybe where they go in the future. And if he's great next year or whatever, that's fantastic. But here's the issue that I have. When they coached the Senior Bowl, I had a personnel man tell me that Gruden and Mike Mayock were absolutely insistent that they had Drew Lock and Daniel Jones on their roster, that they absolutely had to have the two potential first-round quarterbacks on their roster, which may not mean that they're bailing on Derek Carr, but it 100% signals they are in the market for a quarterback. Now, beyond Drew Lock and Daniel Jones, everybody in the league right now is talking about how John Gruden is in love with Kyler Murray. Okay?
Right.
So now that's them connected to three quarterbacks. And by the way, just to give you a little extra on Gruden, I heard he absolutely drove Daniel Jones out of his mind. I heard Drew Lock was just kind of like, kind of dealt with it. I heard Daniel Jones was like, it just was, Gruden rode him pretty hard at the Senior Bowl. So they're in the market for a quarterback, and you and I both know if you go and get Antonio Brown, this is something where you probably want him connecting immediately, right, with your long-term quarterback. And if that's not Derek Carr, let's see what happens.
And what we also know is that Gruden's body language with Carr during the course of games this season wasn't great.
Horrific.
We also know that Carr's deep ball prowess isn't great, which is one of the things that Antonio Brown does best. Sometimes it's just like, do you have eyes? Just kind of piggybacking on what you said there, Charles. One team I heard to keep an eye on is that teams are at least talking about potentially being interested in Carr is Washington.
Right.
So let's see.
Well, Washington, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Washington, I think. Look, they're 100% squarely in play for.
They should be. They have to be.
They should be.
With
Yeah,
Alex
a quarterback.
Smith, right?
Yeah. So I think from a trade standpoint, they're in play. I think from a draft pick standpoint, they're in play. They are not leaving this offseason process without a quarterback.
By the way, I really like Derek Carr for Washington.
Really?
One of the reasons I liked Alex Smith for Washington was because Jay Gruden does have a reputation for being really good at scheming up things for his quarterback. So it doesn't have to be all that complicated for his quarterbacks. Generally perform pretty well. Like it's, he schemes it up pretty good for him. And I think Carr, with some of his limitations, it's not un-Alex Smith-like, put it that way.
Is it not awkward, though, to have one Gruden brother not like Derek Carr and deal him to another Gruden brother?
You know what, Charles? It is, right? But I think we both know this. Those two guys are very different coaches.
Yeah,
as far as kind of like...
And they're competitive with each other, too.
Right,
yeah.
Right. While Jay Gruden kind of has this reputation for being able to custom fit an offense to his guy, John has his offense.
Right.
And you're going to run that.
Right.
So, by the way, if I'm the Raiders, I think they should trade Derek Carr. I think they should. I think Gruden should get his guy. Mm-hmm. Whoever his quarterback is, he should go get it. Now, I will add this. No guarantee he's going to develop him. In all the years John Gruden's been a head coach in this league, you're not going to find the guy that he's developed. And there have been guys kind of down the pipeline. So no guarantee it works out, but I do think that he should go get his guy. Speaking of teams that might be in the quarterback market, Charles, Arizona Cardinals. You had a great story over the combine saying that Kyler Murray was firmly in play for the Cardinals at pick number 1. When I was out and about that weekend, I heard from multiple league sources who told me they believed that Murray was going first based on what they'd heard internally from them. Now, I think you and I both know this. Not done yet, right? But this is something that at least over the weekend was real. Do you feel like Kyler Murray, A, is a good fit for the Cardinals, and B, what are the chances that this Rosen stuff is just a ruse? with the theory being that the Cardinals went down there to talk up Murray so they could drive up the price of the number 1 pick.
Okay.
While they're going to keep Rosen the whole time. That's the theory.
Right. So I had a chance to talk to a league source today. Okay. And it was an interesting conversation from the standpoint of he's kind of dialed in on this, what's going on. And he said to me unequivocally, Kyler Murray's going number 1. He's like, listen, he is going number 1. Because we kind of had the conversation about, obviously, former GM Charlie Casserly coming out and saying, not good in the interview, not good in the whatever, the demeanor, less than not good on the board, whatever. It is what it is. I think that what was interesting about this conversation, he said Kyler Murray is absolutely going number 1. Now, he didn't say Kyler Murray is absolutely going number 1 to the Arizona Cardinals. He said Kyler Murray is absolutely going number 1. Now, I kind of pushed him on that, and he danced around it or whatever. And the only thing it makes me think is I believe he's going to the Cardinals. I believe they are taking him. And I believe right now Steve Keim, the general manager, is working behind the scenes to get whatever he can out of Rosen. I think that's going to be a process. It's going to take some time. And in that time, we're going to continue to see stuff like Casserly coming out and saying things. There are going to be a lot of different reports coming in different directions. The only thing, the 2% question that I have is, what if John Gruden and the Raiders love Kyler Murray so much that this is a deep agent ruse, as you said, like for Rosen to have the Instagram account stuff and all that.
Yeah.
What if this is, and again, I give this a 2% shot, a total, masterful, unbelievable deep agent ruse to get the Raiders to move up to 1 to take Kyler Murray, and you walk away with a slew of draft picks. And it was always keeping Josh Rosen in place. That is the only credence I give any of this. I absolutely believe whatever the date is today. Okay, March 6th. I'm saying Kyler Murray's going to go number 1. 98% chances to the Cardinals, 2% chances to the Raiders.
Hey, let me co-sign on that, because at least one of the guys I talked to didn't say the Cardinals. He just said best player in the draft, he's going number 1, which made me think, okay, so I think there's something to that, man. And by the way, I talked to John back when he was an analyst every year. I'd always ask him about the Chiefs' situations. He's very much, before the drafts, if there's anybody that would appreciate kind of like what Patrick Mahomes brought to the Chiefs and that creativity factor, it's John Gruden. And which quarterback has that the most in this year's draft class? After I talked to Greg Cosell about this, Greg Cosell is the ESPN executive producer. I asked him about that. Like, which quarterback kind of has the most Mahomesian, second reaction trait, the ability to make something from nothing when things broke down. And Cosell is not really much for hyperbole at all. Made it pretty clear. It's Kyler Murray. And you can find that story on yahoo.com. Check that out. But yeah.
Good plug.
So to me,
good plug. That's a plug alert.
Yeah, we got to do that. Charles. Come on. So look, yeah, Kyler Murray makes a lot of sense for John Gruden, if you ask me. So we also had the franchise tag deadline this week. I thought you had an interesting column on Demarcus Lawrence and the Cowboys and why their decision could breed some contempt.
Yeah, I mean, he's pissed. Like, he is. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised. He hasn't said anything publicly yet. I don't know if he will say anything publicly. I don't know if his agent will say anything publicly. I have no idea now that they're engaged in this process and he's been tagged. Yeah. I can only tell you that I knew down the stretch of the regular season that this was a situation where he ended up tagged. Lawrence did not want to go through this again in 2019. He felt like he had earned a long-term contract. He felt like the Cowboys had told him they were going to reward him with a market-sized long-term contract. And whatever the initial number was in the exchange, once the season ended and they started to talk numbers, it was so low that Lawrence knew instantaneously, I'm getting tagged again. Like, he just knew. He's like, this number. Yeah, this number out of the box is we're so far apart right now. They're going to tag me again. And I mean, there's a sense of feeling insulted on his part and of feeling furious because he's not getting a long-term deal. And here's what I want you to chime in on. From Lawrence's standpoint, he sits there and he says, David Irving, like now Lawrence hasn't said this, but I'm going to tell you what is going on inside that franchise. David Irving can't get on the field. Okay. Indefinitely suspended, has all the tools, whatever, is his heart in the game. these are legitimate questions. Randy Gregory, obviously, there's illness, there's mental health aspects of this, but the bottom line is, from a football standpoint, 100% unreliable for the Dallas Cowboys. Lawrence was a guy who got suspended for PEDs going all the way back to the 2016 season. From that point on, he decided, listen, I'm getting this right. Like, no more of this. Like, it's time for me to get this right, get myself where I need to be. And yet this entire season, all he heard about was how much they love Dak and are going to extend him. Hey, they trade for Amari Cooper and almost instantaneously are like, we got to extend this guy. And then obviously Zeke is going to be asking for his money. You, knowing the league, having covered it, knowing how locker rooms work, how pissed are you as a player if you're like, yo, I've done everything I can to prove I deserve this. I'm a leader. I'm a top 10 edge rusher. Are you going to take care of me or not? Or are you going to jerk me around?
I got it. I totally hear Demarcus on that. Like, you want your money, because let's look at Olivier Vernon's contract a couple years ago. That was $52 million in guarantees. So while you might be tempted to look at what Demarcus Lawrence made last year on the tag, which is $17 million, and this year, which is $20 million, say $37 million over 2 years, that's pretty good.
Sure.
Remember, Olivier Vernon 3 years ago, got $52 million in guarantees. So I get it, right? Because you want your money. You want to be paid what you feel like you're worth. But the good news for DeMarcus is this. They can't tag him again next year. True. They can't. Now the ball is in his.
It would be the quarterback tag, which ain't happening.
Right. They basically can't. By the way, Charles, guess what? By the time he signs his deal, he'll be 27. Next year, he'll play next year at 28. So he'll still have a prime season. They won't tag him. Then now the leverage shifts to his court.
Sure.
So if he could just be a little bit more patient, have another killer season, DeMarcus Lawrence is going to get his money. But I get it, man. That's a tough situation.
I think the only thing you worry about is when you think about, some other guys who get tagged, and you just always assume, well, they'll play out the tag and then they'll get all their money. Well,
doesn't always happen. Other defensive players who got franchised include Jadeveon Clowney from the Texans, Frank Clark from the Seahawks, Grady Jarrett from the Falcons, and Dee Ford in Kansas City. Now, this is interesting because there's been a theory posited about the Chiefs and Dee Ford and why they're willing to listen to offers, which I reported over the weekend. They're listening to offers for Ford, who's 28 years old. This is two things basically happening. The first is that by putting it out that he's not a 4-3 scheme fit, that could make it easier for them for their franchise tag as a linebacker, which they put him on, to stick. That's worth $15.4 million. If D challenges that and says, no, I'm going to be a defensive end in this system, it'd be $17.1 million.
Right.
So, maybe this could be, I saw Pro Football Talk posit that as a theory. And to me, maybe that does make sense because I honestly think that he's a good fit as a 4-3 Russian in Steve Spagnuolo's system. I mean, that's kind of how you draw him up, to be honest. So, but if it's not that, Charles, it's that they're worried about getting the value out of the player, because he's 28 years old. If you know that you don't want to sign him to a long-term contract because of his past medical history, instead of letting him walk at some point, you're just going to get some value out of him now and trade him. So to me, I think it's one of the two things. We'll see how this goes. Anything about any of these other franchise players stand out to you?
I think they're all guys that there is and I actually think that it's common now, franchise tags. They're all guys that teams have a worry about what happens post the long-term deal. Okay, so it's not just about, well, we don't have the money or, well, we want to extend other guys. No, there are guys who get franchise tagged because teams are often nervous about how a player is going to play once he has the money. And look, it's not just these guys. I remember when Von Miller went through his whole deal with the Denver Broncos after winning a Super Bowl, after being Super Bowl MVP, all this stuff. They literally, in the middle of the negotiations, John Elway's asking, well, hey, what's going to happen? Once this guy gets the deal, we're going to give him all this money, and he's going to basically be a quarterback paid on defense. And what we want Von Miller in the conversation every single year of this deal as a defensive player of the year candidate. And if we don't get that, we don't feel like we're getting our bang for our buck.
Now, let's run through those guys real quick. J.D. Clowney, we've talked about him in the past. What's the reason that they'd be a little concerned about getting the money out of him?
I mean, honestly, there's a number of reasons. I'm sure you have something specifically in mind, but, being in Houston, look, there was health with Clowney early on. There was that. There was questions about effort early on. And then really, I think ultimately it came down to, I know people say sacks don't matter. It's just pressures. But
that's what I was going to mention.
Right. If you're going to get paid the massive deal, if you're going to get paid the market-setting free agent defensive deal, you better be Khalil Mack getting the sacks, getting the forced fumbles, changing the look of everything defensively. You better be J.J. Watt. You better be Aaron Donald. You better be someone who's not just getting pressures. You're getting finishes, and you're altering games. You're becoming someone that 2 guys have to account for, 3 guys have to account for. When the opposing offense sits down to start their meeting about how they're going to game plan against the defense, you're at the top of that list. So for the Houston Texans,
consistent.
Yeah, I'm asking you, Houston Texans, is Clowney at the top of that list? Or given how Watt played last year, he bounced back, is Watt still at the top of that list?
Well, I think one of the best stats for that's not even sacks, even though he was 18.5 the last 2 seasons total, is quarterback hits. And Clowney's actually pretty respectable there. Maybe to a degree I kind of hadn't really expected. He had 21 quarterback hits last year, which is about like 15th, 16th in the league. And honestly, that's 4 less than J.J. Watt. So like the last 2 seasons, he's been much more consistent about getting to the quarterback. But that's something that we really hadn't seen up until last season. And I think, and by last season, I mean 2017. I think that's something that, maybe you got to keep in mind.
One thing I will throw at you too, because you've brought this up before. Contract year. He was, make no mistake, guys, he was in contract year in 2017 because he was looking for a deal following 2017. And then obviously in his 5th year option, he's also in a contract year. So I would argue, you question, and teams do legitimately question this, does a guy only show up in the contract years? And if that's the case, let's just keep franchising because then we get the contract year every year.
Yep. In 2016, he had 17 hurries and only 6 sacks. So like he's consistently gotten better, right? But he's 26 years old. That'll be how old he is this season. And it's a decision those guys are going to have to make.
The thing about these guys that you and I both know, if they're going to sign that are getting franchised, if they're going to sign a long-term deal rather than a franchise tag, they're going to be a top 5 player at their position financially. Right. And if you're going to sign, and what else are they going to be? Guy, I mean, they got to be program guys too, right? I mean, that's another thing. Is it a program guy? And so, look at Landon Collins, right? Here's a guy who doesn't get the tag from the New York Giants. And frankly, I mean, I'm at a loss right now for some of the decisions made. Collins in particular, although it depends who you talk to in the league, how you feel about Landon Collins. Because I can tell you, man, there's some teams who flat out say, hey, go look at the I had a guy bring up something. He goes, hey, go look at the safeties that are going to be on the market. And he said, I'm telling you right now, he said, I don't know who, but one of these safeties or 2 of these safeties is not going to make anywhere near the $13, $14 million a year that they want. And he's like, he kind of banged a little bit on Landon Collins. He said, look, you know who you pay $13 or $14 million? He said, you pay
Earl Thomas.
Earl Thomas, because why? He's a coverage safety. He can cover like elite
a playmaker.
Level.
He's an eraser. You pay $13 million to an eraser at safety.
And he said about Landon Collins, because he had seen I tweeted, I was trying to be snarky and I tweeted, yo, you're going to pay Eli Manning $17 million in new money in 2019, but you're paying Landon Collins 0. He said to me, look, I'm not signing Landon Collins for $13 or $14 million to be a box safety. He's like, that's what he is. He's a box safety. And in this league now, we don't sign box safeties.
It doesn't matter.
For that money. Yeah.
Right. It doesn't matter. Like it's not that much value. But I do have some thoughts on this, right?
Okay.
He just turned 25 years old. Like literally he just turned 25. He's a guy that you invested a 2nd round pick in. He was a team captain. He is beloved in that room. And he was 1st team All-Pro. Maybe you don't sign him long-term, but you franchise him, in my opinion. And I think your guy has a good point because it's not like this is Earl Thomas or even Eric Berry in his prime. But there are things that he still does that can help a franchise. The Giants aren't better off not having Landon Collins. And I don't think it sends a great message to that room when you've got a team captain who, again, is only 25, who does what they ask him to do, who's played hurt, and you don't tag him. It's $11 million. I actually did a little math, Chuck. So check me out here, right? Right now, according to Over the Cap, they've got $25 million in cap room. 32 if they cut Janoris Jenkins, who wasn't good last year. So, teams try to keep about $8 million in case of emergency, right? That's 24. Then you take away $5 million for the NFL draft. You sign your kids. That brings you to about 19. That's still more than enough to make that franchise tag work. And you're 5-11. You're changing the culture. Inside, he's a program guy. Now, as a football player, yeah, he's got some things he could get better at, especially on the back end. So your guy is right. But to not be in the business to pay a 25-year-old former All-Pro, Chuck, I mean, that's tough, isn't it? Meanwhile, keeping Eli, and you're just letting him go for a third-round compensatory pick that you might not even get depending on who you sign. You know what, Charles? How about this, Charles? If you're gonna let go of Landon Collins, you look like you know something, by the way, right now. Go ahead. No. You talk. What?
I mean, maybe you're not trying. I mean, look, maybe the Giants are in a little more of a rebuild mode. And I understand he's young enough that you can include him in a rebuild mode.
I love when Charles does this. Yes. Yeah, just say it.
I'm just saying, like, I'm not going to say they're Tank Lawrence in it, but I mean, they're not tanking it. But I will say that you have to understand that the Giants are in a little bit of a rebuild mode that's going to probably burn a little Saquon Barkley age. It's going to burn a little age off of Odell Beckham. But, you got a quarterback who's going to come in, if not this season, next season.
Yes.
And you got about 3-4 years here where you're going to have to try to turn this franchise around. And over that 3-4 year span, you're not sitting there going, we're trying to pay a safety $12, $13 million a year who can't, be an elite level coverage guy.
You think they're tanking for Tua or Herbert? At least you're considering. You think so. Here's the thing, right? Okay, fine. Let's say that's the case. You can't just let the 25-year-old
I didn't say that, by the way. I did not. You said that.
But I said it, and you can tell them I said it. Here's the thing, though, right? Okay, like stuff happens in football, okay, but you got to trade the guy. If you want to rebuild and start from the ground up, that's good with me. But you have to trade the guys. You could, whether that was for at least a third-round pick. You could get a third-round pick for Landon Collins. I gotta believe. And that way, you will be covering your bases in case that you don't get the compensatory pick. So there's still some ways you can shoot holes in that plan. Even if, hey, you like Tua, you like Justin Herbert, maybe we're not going to go all in. By the way, they went 5-11 last season with Landon, I don't know, Chuck.
And there's another thing, too, that you have to understand. You like Herbert, you like Tua. There's going to be another quarterback who's going to come. Hey, Kyler Murray a year ago. We were talking about Kyler Murray.
That's true.
The year before Mitch Trubisky, becomes a top pick. We weren't talking about Mitch Trubisky, so there's going to be a third quarterback in that mix who's going to be considered an elite level guy that everybody's going to go crazy about right now. So it's not just Herbert. It's not just Tua. I'm curious to see how the quarterback draft picks shake out. And I just think, man, with these safeties, the one problem I have about Landon, Dave Gettleman knows what his salary slots are. It's how he's always been. Mm-hmm. He knew that in Carolina. He knows who he wants to pay, who he doesn't. He never wanted to pay Josh Norman. He knew he wasn't going to pay Josh Norman. That's how they ended up in that situation. Who, by the way, they put the tag on Josh Norman and then took it off. They just didn't put the tag on Landon Collins. So I think, to me, the question for Gettleman is, listen, man, you know what your salary slots are. You knew what this dude's salary slot was going to be when it came time. Why didn't you just move him at the deadline? Maybe you could have really gotten something for him at the deadline.
That's the thing, man. Like, you can sell me on any rebuild in the NFL, basically. Like, John Gruden, you want to rebuild? Okay, just don't trade a third for Martavis Bryant and surrender a second in the Mac deal, right? Like, you want to rebuild and stack picks? Let's go. I'm all in. I'm with you. But Collins is a guy you got to get something for, other than a mysterious third-round pick you may not get depending on who you sign. One other thing about this is that I thought that when I saw that Pat Shurmur said that Eli Manning will be a starting quarterback in 2019, I thought two things. The first is that Odell Beckham is just somewhere, just not in a good place. And the second is that maybe they're doing this to execute the Kansas City plan. Chiefs had a quarterback in Alex Smith. They moved up to get his replacement. They let him sit and watch for a year. I wrote a story about that. It did a lot of good for Mahomes. If you were going to take someone like Dwayne Haskins or Drew Lock, it would be good for him to sit behind Eli, while also potentially lighting a fire under Eli's butt. I think Eli statistically actually had a pretty decent season last year. He completed 66% of his passes, 21 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. And that's surprising, right? Like, I bet you didn't think his stats were that good. Now, look, I watched some of the, I know, it wasn't good, but maybe that lights a fire under him. Here's a guy who's won 2 Super Bowls, who's a proud guy. Maybe he doesn't just surrender the job. And maybe you get a better Eli out of that too. So those are the 2 things I thought when I saw that. But man, it's fascinating, man, what's happening with the Giants and Eli. Because if there's no young quarterback on the roster for 2019, I don't know how well that's going to go over on that roster.
It would be bad. It would not be good. It would be bad, especially if unless Eli has like a third life in him, like Dwayne Wade, like unless there's just like, we thought he was done and he comes out and all of a sudden he's an all-star, he's just plays at a level where like, wow, like we didn't expect this. Maybe he kicks in the TB12 method this offseason and comes back out looking good. Yeah, it's hard for me to believe you exit this draft without a quarterback and a quarterback high and don't get absolutely, just destroyed for it, especially with Gettleman letting Landon Collins go. And, look, there are going to be a lot of questions in New York. Like, what's the plan? I think that's the question. If you're a Giants fan right now, you have to go, okay, you don't want to pay a box safety, whatever you're going to pay him. You're going to pay Eli, but you should ask, like seriously, a reporter should look at Gettleman and say, what is your plan?
What is the plan
for this team? Well, like, what are you doing?
What's the one
now?
thing Dave Gettleman likes more than anything, Charles?
Donuts? I don't know, dude. I don't know.
It's edge rushers, defensive linemen, big stout guys that can
you always
rush
be
the
asking
passer.
me these blind questions, and I'm like, I'm not reading your mind. I don't know, man.
I think it's pretty known that he likes defensive linemen. One thing you got to remember too, though, like they need help on the defensive line, and this is a very good defensive line draft in the front 7. There's going to be somebody available at their pick that's going to be hard for him to pass on. So just knowing his history, he almost always takes an edge rusher or defensive tackle or something like that in the first 2 rounds. That could be interesting.
I mean, just imagine. I know we're all saying like Haskins makes sense there, and I get that. I understand that, and I liked what Haskins did at the combine. Clearly, I feel like there was a little bit, there's some questions about him, but I thought I liked what he did at the combine. So I
did too. I like Haskins.
Yeah, I can see that solidifying it. But sitting where they're sitting, what if something wild happens? And what if say Gruden is sitting there, say Murray comes off 1, right? And say Gruden's been pulling the okie doke this whole time or whatever, or he did fall in love with Drew Lock, and then say, boom, all of a sudden Drew Lock shocks everyone and comes off at 4. Or a multitude of things happen. And then all of a sudden you get like just an unbelievable, what if Josh Allen is sitting there at the Giants pick? What if Nick Bosa, for whatever reason, slides and he's sitting there and some people are saying he's better than Joey Bosa and he's sitting there at your pick? What if, like, this does happen? I mean, Joey Bosa wasn't supposed to be sitting there where he was sitting for the Chargers. So what if one of these elite, whether it's Quinnen, I would say of the 3 that I would be most interested in if I'm the Giants, Josh Allen, Nick Bosa, Quinnen Williams. Like any of those 3 guys slide, because I think all 3 of those guys legitimately have even Allen, to some respect, has an argument for the number 1 overall pick. Now, I'm not saying they would get drafted there, particularly like a Josh Allen, because edge linebackers don't ever go number 1. But I'm just saying these are 3 guys that all of a sudden, if they're sitting there and you're going, man, like, are we absolutely in love with Haskins? Like, was this absolutely our guy? Or what if Gruden blows everybody's mind and just completely goes the other way of what we would expect him to be for his system, and he takes Haskins, And we're like, now what do you do? Are you taking Drew Lock? If you're the Giants? So it's going to be an interesting draft, man. This is going to be a fun one because there's a lot of intrigue around some of these guys and how they're going to stack up. And it's hard to beat last year because literally the morning of last year, people are still sitting there going, well, it's Sam Darnold 1, right? Like he's going to go 1. And then that didn't happen.
Let's transition back to free agency real quick because Landon Collins, somebody people here in Kansas City want badly. I know the Chiefs are looking at those safeties. There's like 7 of them in this year's class. that could really help this team. You know, I think that's going to come down to like a price type of thing. I wouldn't be surprised if Collins, you know, or Thomas end up being a little bit kind of out of their range, unless what your guy was telling you about Collins and the box safeties rings true. I think they're looking for value, so just keep that in mind. Because I was told months ago the Chiefs would address edge in the draft and like DB in some form of free agency.
Terez, I'm telling you, I trust this guy. And he's like, you watch. He's like, that safety. He said, if you look at the top 5 safeties that are going to be out there, he's like, a couple of these guys are absolutely going to get left out in the cold on price. He said,
and that's where I think the Chiefs could jump in,
and that's good.
On the value.
If you're the Chiefs, you're psyched because you're like, you know what? Maybe if we don't get Earl or we don't get, you know, Earl, we'll get one of these other, you know, 4 guys, and they can all help us in some way, shape, or form. I'm telling you, I only think it's Earl. I think Earl is the one guy to me that could land the big fish contract because of that coverage ability.
And I think like a tip to that, the Chiefs were going to surrender a 2nd-round pick for the guy last fall. So like this shows the value is there, right? Like they were going to surrender a good pick for the guy. Now, I think there's a ripple effect here too, right? Because if the Chiefs get the right guy, you know, that's when maybe you'd see Eric Berry get released, but I don't think that until that happens, they would do it, but who knows, right? Another thing, one last thing, I do expect the Chiefs to kind of look at a receiver, believe it or not, like a 1-year prove-it type, right? Because now they've got the MVP, guys want to play with him because he throws to who's open, and I think it's a potentially attractive deal because the Chiefs have the ability to make receivers look real good, and they need help. They need to fortify that 3rd receiver spot. So I do expect them to kind of look at maybe a slot receiver. They'll be looking for some sort of value, I think, at the receiver position.
We didn't really ever talk about this, but I'm curious now that the tags are off the board. Like, who's your top free agent? Who do you think's if you had to sit there and go, you know, just laying out the guys that are out there, who do you feel like is your top, you know, number 1 free agent now that the tags have all been kind of taken off the board? Because, you know, I think Lawrence, some people probably would have said that Lawrence was the number 1 free agent, but I think it's interesting.
Yeah. I think you have to make a decision about what you need as a football team between Le'Veon, Earl Thomas, and Trey Flowers.
Okay, I like Flowers. I think that was one that a lot of people are sleeping on.
That's the one I would pick, Charles, but Trey Flowers is 25 years old, dude. Why isn't he a Patriot? Why haven't they framed? Like, that would scare me. Like, they don't miss on this stuff, dude. Wow. They don't really miss on this, bro. So that's what I love Trey Flowers as a player.
Okay, I do too, but I will say this. Okay, you're right. They don't miss, but I think that there is a certain element of their value system when it comes to, like, okay, Jamie Collins, they were like, this dude's a freelancer. He makes a lot of negative plays for us, so we're not going to deal with this. We all thought, oh, you got to re-sign Jamie Collins. They're like, no, forget that. So they trade Jamie Collins. They get rid of him. Chandler Jones was a guy who you're like, okay, this guy's absolutely, you got to have him. Mm-hmm. Good, really good player, but I think for the money, they feel like they made the right decision with Chandler Jones. But then you got Dante Hightower, who they paid. You got Stephon Gilmore, who they paid. They pick and choose defensively who they pay. So yeah,
so a little. Isn't that what scares you though? I feel like, what do they know that we don't? Like, I'm just saying. Look, I love Trey Flowers. Look, the Lions are probably going to sign or go after Trey Flowers. They'll be a better football team for that. But I think you have to at least think about why they wouldn't do it. And I think, you know, if you're a team, that's something you better, because the smart teams are considering that. Put it that way.
I think because, well, I mean, look, he didn't. The truth is, like, his sack production over the 3 years was, you know, was good, but I mean, it wasn't like, you know, you're not blowing it out. So if this,
and we just talked about the importance of that.
Right? Yeah, you got to be a finisher for the contract you're going to sign. You have to bring everything to the table. So maybe that has something to do with Flowers. I don't know. I try not to bang. I really don't. I try not to bang on the Patriots anymore, because there were a number of years where I was just like, what the hell are they doing? And then they let a guy go. I watched the guy go elsewhere. And then they go and get, like, hey, Kyle Van Noy. Like, the Lions, you're getting rid of Kyle Van Noy. We'll turn you into a good player.
To be clear, I'm not banging him. Like, this, I want to just make that clear. Okay. I'm saying, no, I'm not doing that. I'm saying,
I think you're banging him.
No, shut up. No, we're not going to have that on the record. No, I'm saying.
No, let's stay in. That's
no. I'm saying he's 25. Why aren't they doing it? That would scare me if I'm another team. That's what I'm saying. Put some respect on Bill Belichick's name. He knows what he's doing.
And another thing about Bill too, I will say the Patriots are really good about identifying guys way before they get I think they're a team that's after year 3, they instantaneously start thinking, if this guy's got the goods, let's just extend him now. Because if we wait another year, the market goes up. If we wait 2 years and he's a first round pick, we're going to be, paying through the nose. So I think the guys that they know fit perfectly in their system, the culture, all that stuff they want, they try to extend those guys quickly.
You know what? I have an answer for you. I think the top guys are Earl Thomas. Here's why. Le'Veon Bell's a great football player. I get it, but he's a running back. I can find a running back. That's the easiest thing to scout. What's harder to find is the rangy safety. Now, he's coming off the injury. We don't know how that's going to go. But what we do know is it's a gamble, and he's 30. But if he's right, that he has the skill set that's not duplicable. That's what I would say. Maybe you think about C.J. Mosley, or maybe you think about Anthony Barr too.
I'm going to throw you a curve here.
What you got?
See, mine's a Patriot, but it's not Flowers. I think it's Trent Brown. I really do. I think you're talking about a young left tackle who definitely showed some ability, and I know just how ridiculous it is for teams now to ever get a shot at tackles in free agency. Shoot, in the preseason last year, there were some teams that were considering shopping some key youthful pieces of their roster, just to pick up a backup offensive lineman who had starting potential in a year, which is, that's pretty interesting. So to me, I'm what about the left tackle for the, New England Patriots who started on a Super Bowl winning team? Not saying he's perfect, but I don't think there's any doubt he's going to have a ton of suitors out there. So I wouldn't be surprised if the guy who draws the most sort of frenzy ends up being the left tackle.
I believe that. Do you think that what happened to Nate Solder last year, signing with the Giants, not really playing that well, could hurt him? Because wherever Trent Brown goes, he's not going to have the luxury of the Patriots' quick game, well-schemed offense, and then Tom Brady getting the ball out quickly.
And he's 380. There are going to be teams that go, look, he's 380, and we don't like tackles setting up at 380 who we feel like we might have to have deeper drops. We might have to have plays that, develop a little later. It's not going to be, like you said, with Tom. It's super, get it out.
He is 25 though.
He's young.
He's huge.
Yeah.
I like that. I don't dislike the player. I just think that's fascinating.
I just think offensive line is such a premium now, particularly tackles, if you really believe. But you're right about Nate, man. And that adds to what you said about the Patriots. That was that one where I'm like, what are they doing? Why would they wait, I don't know. He seems like, he's good enough. He's not perfect, but
name a Patriot that went somewhere and killed it. It's tough. That's tough. One other thing, we always talk about how's a guy going to be when he gets the money or whatever. In Trent Brown's NFL.com profile, under his weaknesses, it says scouts call him an inconsistent worker. So if they had those notes on him 4 years ago, that's something that they'll probably be trying to dig up now.
Listen, man. Anybody who's 380 is an inconsistent worker. Okay? I'm just going to go ahead and say it. There is some lacking consistency somewhere at 380. Either it's you're eating late, you're eating carbs before bed, or you don't get to 380 without lacking some sort of consistency. So,
God, he's 380 too.
I mean, maybe his consistency comes at the dinner table, but not elsewhere.
I know it sounds like I'm bagging on the guy. I'm not. I swear, I like the guy as a player. Well, how about this? Are you hearing stuff about him? Are you hearing that teams are gonna?
I'm hearing there's gonna be a lot of guys for him.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm hearing that there's in terms of just the overall number of suitors for the high paid contract. I've had guys say, look, Nick Foles, there's not going to be a huge giant market for him. Le'Veon Bell, there's not going to be a huge giant market for him. I heard Brown is one guy, and then I heard Flowers, depending on what you want from that position, is another guy who could have
I believe that.
A good market. That.
So I think we mentioned this a little bit on our last podcast. I think the slot receiver market's pretty interesting. I've heard what some of these guys are asking for. Adam Humphries from the Bucks is looking for 10 to 11. Golden Tate's asking for 12 to 14. I heard like even
Cole Beasley was pretty pissed about his $20 million guarantee.
Yeah, exactly. Did you see that? Yeah. So like Jamison Crowder's asking for a lot too, and I don't think those numbers are going to get there, obviously, but that's just like where they're starting and where they're asking. I think this is going to be an interesting market because now more than ever, slot receivers are basically starters. Most teams are in 11 personnel most of the time.
Right.
I'm not saying they're all going to break the bank. I don't think these guys are going to get close.
I don't think any
numbers.
of them are. Yeah, I don't think.
But I do think that teams are looking for receivers. I do think that it's a potential for some of these teams to kind of slide in there. I think the Raiders are going to look for a slot or a receiver of some type. The Colts, the Jets, the Lions, the Broncos, the Packers. Like some of these teams are going to be looking for receivers. Like all these teams, they'll be looking for value. But I just thought it was fascinating that the numbers that they're at least trying to ask for are so high.
I just don't think you're not going to see the blitz on these guys. Like, they're going to be the ones where it kind of lingers and somebody's going to have to come off the board and sort of set the market. But I know they're starters. Like, I get that. But the problem is a lot of people, we've glamorized the slot receiver position to the point where when we think slot receiver, we think of Edelman, right? I mean, that guy's so freaking rare. Like, you go watch the Super Bowl, okay? Like, hey, let's throw Aqib Talib at Edelman. Oh, my God, he killed Aqib Talib. Oh, let's throw Marcus Peters at Edelman. Oh, my God, he killed Marcus Peters. Let's throw Nickel Roby-Coleman at Julian Edelman. Pretty soon it was like, yo, like, we commit 2 guys. Like, you need an extra guy. Like, you can't man this guy up. There's so few like slot guys that are like that can just really devour a team offensively. And there's so few schemes where
they can fully take advantage of that.
Right, fully take advantage of it. And then, Brady, who I don't know if anyone's ever said this, but I've kind of heard the nickname. I don't know how widely it is on the Patriots, but I know that there has occasionally been a nickname around the Patriots. They call him Tunnel Tom.
Oh my God.
Where it's like great. He has it's Gronk, Edelman, like he has the tunnel on the first couple guys. And so you may not have the quarterback who is so vibing with your slot receiver that he's worth, I don't know, man, $10, $11 million is a lot of money.
I don't think they're going to get close to that, no. but I do think that that's what they're asking for, trying to capitalize on it. So I think the slot receiver market's going to be pretty interesting. Like I said earlier, I think the Chiefs would be kind of in that. I don't know. I think they'll be looking for value, though, just like a lot of teams.
Before we go, though, obviously, look, got the Kansas City Chiefs fan base. We would be remiss if we did not make sure we covered all our bases there. One thing that did pop up that I thought was kind of interesting, you got defensive end Chris Jones. You got a little Instagram video that pops up of him and Le'Veon Bell working out. And, you got the, what if it was Kansas City? It's got everybody excited that, maybe Le'Veon Bell. I tend to think, what if I don't have a big market and I need to generate some interest?
And I got look, when this started like popping up like over the weekend in Indianapolis, I started reaching out to some guys. This is not happening, guys.
Okay,
like I don't know how many times I have to. I wrote this in December. Right I wrote this in December, right after the Chiefs had to let go of Kareem Hunt. I mean, anything can happen in pro football, Charles. You know that, but like, it's my understanding this is not a scenario that's real. So let's just leave that in the past. Bell's gonna find a place to play. I don't think it'd be Kansas City, though.
Listen, people have to understand. Do not put it past players to try and generate markets. Okay, seriously.
Yeah, they're trying to do that.
Like,
right.
if Lev, the whole idea that Lev was a little heavy. I'll say this: when he didn't report, there was definitely some talk in the Pittsburgh franchise that I never heard the 260, but I did hear like, if he's going to come in, he was going to be out of shape. It was going to take maybe as long as like 6 weeks to get him to the point where he could really hit it hard for them, which is not enough. And so, I think that the quote unquote Le'Veon Bell sweepstakes is a little less sweeps than we hoped. So I would not put it past Bell to try and make sure. Yeah, look, you wanna. Players are not immune to this, okay? They look out there and they're saying, where could I potentially go? Let me make sure I drop all that.
What do you think about the fact that he basically punted on the $14 million franchise tag this year? Now he's about to hit free agency. The market's not overflowing. Like, what do you think about that?
I mean, he ain't getting that money back. We already talked about that.
Man.
Like, he's not getting that money back. But, it's it is what it is. Like at this point, like he did what he had to do, and I don't know. We'll see. I hope that he comes out and he's ballistic and plays really well.
Me
for
too.
Whoever.
I'm a pro player guy, but didn't we say like back when this stuff was going on, like what was the number that we said that he better get in free agency to have made that worth it? Wasn't it like 40 guaranteed or something? What did Gurley get?
I think it's more than to recoup it.
To have made it worth it.
To have made it worth it. I mean,
right? It's tough, right?
I don't think. Listen, to make it worth it, he would have had to have. I know there was this idea. Well, we're going to pitch him as not just a running back. We're going to pitch him as a weapon, an offensive weapon, which means maybe wide receiver money. And I'm like, good luck with that.
Nah. Yeah, no,
because teams are gonna. I'm a weapon. They're gonna be like, you're running back. That's how that's gonna go. No, I'm a
2
weapon.
years
no,
since
you're
you last
back.
played. Yep,
Yeah.
2 years since you last saw the field. We don't know what kind of shape you're in. So there's going to be more of this in the offseason. Charles and I love the offseason. We love the draft. We love free agency. We're all in. So we want you guys to stay with us. We appreciate all of you that have been listening and been along for the ride. We're going to keep rolling. You can find me on Twitter at Terez Paylor. You can find Charles on Twitter at Charles Robinson. Give the Yahoo Sports NFL Twitter handle a follow as well. And we'll be back pretty soon here to kind of dive in on free agency and also the draft. So just stay tuned with us. So with that, Charles, say goodbye to our listeners.
Thank you to our new listeners. We have noticed that we got a bump here. We got some additional new listeners coming out of the combine. So rate and review us as always. We appreciate it. And just to let people know, we're once again making the press. Hit us on Twitter with your questions. We want your questions. I did see a round of questions for this one, but I want to kind of bank those, build them up a little bit, and then maybe in the next one we'll hit a couple of the best questions we can find. So rate and review us. Tell your friends about us, and we will be here all off season a couple times a week.
Mm-hmm. And we did kind of answer some of the, like I answered one of the ones I got during my answers about.
Oh, look at you! Look at you catering
about Ford and Houston. Yeah, of course, man. Hey, we appreciate our listeners, man. Mm-hmm. When we have them, we have them. And that's why we've been able to keep them, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, one thing I did want to ask you before we get out of here, and this actually does speak to one of the questions I got from a listener. You still feel the same way about Le'Veon Bell and the Jets? But I still would like it for him. I still kind of think they need that kind of guy to put around Sam Darnold. But as far as like whether or not they do it, I don't know.
Listen, I will say this. I know what the whole stuff about, it's Tevin Coleman or Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell is a better player than Tevin Coleman, okay? So
way more complete.
I mean, if Tevin Coleman is quote-unquote cheap compared to Le'Veon Bell, then I guess that's a conversation you got to have. But here's my thing about the Jets. You got to spend that money somewhere. You got a ton of money, okay? So who are you going to spend it on, And to me, you're indirectly spending on Sam Darnold. I give him the absolute best guy I can, and as long as he's in shape, I still believe that's, in terms of the offensive piece, I think that's Le'Veon Bell.
And that was for you, Nick Spano and Philip Dean. Asked me about D Ford and keeping the pass rush together for another year. Yeah, I would do that. I would do that as opposed to trying to get value for him right now because you got one more year with Patrick Mahomes cheap. And after that, it's going to be $35 million a year or something. So that's what I would do.
Look at that. Right? Look at that. A little overtime.
Yeah, how about that? Yeah. I just couldn't. Hey, you know what, man? On our last podcast, you said, hey, send us your questions, blah, blah.
That's true.
I'm glad you brought that. I want to deliver for our listeners.
Absolutely.
That matters to us. So maybe next overtime, Charles is going to lead that. Yeah, I think that'll work too. So, all right, guys, we appreciate you. We'll see you next time. Peace.